Serious? What's the closest you ever came to a horrible death? A doctor stapled my intestines shut and then went on vacation. Almost dying from not being able to crap is not something I would wish on my worst enemy. I have a heart problem. That in Portuguese is called arrhythmia. I can't translate this. It is a small deformity on my heart that starts pounding too fast whenever I make too much effort. Sometimes I would get small heart attacks, but we never cared much because they were small and went away as fast as they came. Someday, though, I woke up at 5 AM with my heart racing again, and I told my mom. Since it happened before, she told me to go to sleep and it would stop. It did. But that's not where it ends. She took me to school at 7 AM, and the moment I stepped in class, my heart started pounding fast again. I asked my first class teacher to go to the infirmary. I spent 2 hours in there while they checked up everything, and they decided to take me to the hospital. My mom had just laid down to sleep when they called her, which resulted in her rushing to the school with her pajamas on. My heart didn't stop racing at any time. They took me and my pajama mom to the hospital by bus, and I stayed there until 2 PM, with a few tubes attached to me, and my heart was beating about more than 200 times per minute. As far as I remember, me and mom lived with my grandma, so if she knew what was going on, she'd have a heart attack herself and die, so we didn't tell her the situation until it was over. Nowadays, I have to take pills every night to prevent heart attacks. Once I turn 18, I will have to make surgery to remove the deformity so I can live a normal life. Can't wait. Blessings to you. I hope you'll make a good recovery. While undocking a houseboat, the rope we used got wrapped around my leg and I started getting dragged down the riverbank. I was saved by some random plank of wood being nailed into the side of the bank. I was able to put my good foot on that and take off my rope foot shoe, letting me slide the rope off. If that wood wasn't there, I would have fallen in and been dragged down river by my foot. You better steal that plank and turn it into a nice armchair. A guy tried to abduct me when I was 9. The thought of what he might have done to me still freaks me out. I suffered attempted abductions at 5 and again at 11. It is definitely some freaky crap. I nearly died in Hurricane Katrina multiple times, drowning, potential murder situations, eventual general injury and dehydration. Very long story, but I got separated from my family and had days of abject heck before getting saved. Worst incident was the grown couple rolling up on me, pretending they wanted to help me and then beating me unconscious and leaving me for dead in the water for one small half-full bottle of water. They already had water with them. I was a 15-year-old girl at the time. People really turned into animals. I don't think I'll ever really recover from it, TBH. I was once the middle car in a car accident sandwich. Turned down a job end of August 2001 that was on the floor the first plane crashed into. Got shot in the head. I'm seriously living in bonus time. Any more details on the headshot? When I was about 2, my aunt fed me pistachios. What nobody knew was that I was deathly allergic to tree nuts. My mom had put me to sleep because she thought the rash starting to form under my mouth was a pacifier rash. She woke up to me crying. I could barely breathe and was rushed to the hospital. The doctor said if my mom had brought me to the hospital any later I would have died. So yeah, that's how I found out I was allergic to tree nuts. My tonsils tried to kill me when I was a teenager. It started with the worst sore throat you can imagine and then progressed to feeling so fatigued I had trouble walking. I would wake up in the middle of the night drenched and wet, literally like someone threw a bucket of water on me, and shaking terribly. As it progressed I had vivid hallucinations and threw up all night. I felt immediately better after the tonsils were removed, but I lost 20-30 pounds and my hair started falling out after I recovered. A doctor told me it was because when you're that sick your body shuts down non-essential functions like growing hair. I looked a little funny when it started growing back. Now I'm scared to death because I had problems with my tonsils all my life. I almost died twice because of them, although they are how functioning properly. I almost died because of being stupid. When I was 4 I played with a broom, tripped, rammed the broomstick in my mouth and up to my throat, almost choked on it, and I think it was my father who saved me, because the emergency doctor told my parents to not move that freaking thing. But my father just ripped it out of my throat mouth in a panic. I think I had my near-death experience reading this. I was playing on ice with a really fat friend of mine. I was 9. We knew we weren't allowed to play there because it's really dangerous, but we still did. Anyway, that friend was an utter idiot. He started smashing the ice with a hammer to make holes for the ducks, and then of course the ice broke and he fell into the water. He was so heavy that every time he tried to get back on the ice, it would break. At some point he got stuck beneath the ice. I am this really lanky thin 9-year-old girl, so pulling him up in general was difficult. No one else beside me and 2 friends who were just yelling and screaming from the side of the river were there. So my dumb butt decides to grab the hammer and I start smashing that ice so it breaks. Then I attempt to pull him back on the ice, but he is so heavy that he pulls me half underwater as well. After about 10 minutes of both of us half drowning in the ice water, I managed to pull him onto the land. He didn't even thank me and ran off crying to his own house. I waited till my clothes were dry and never told my family anything happened. When next day at school my mom heard my friend had to go to the hospital because of hypothermia, I pretended not to know. While lol. Lesson learned. Don't try to break ice for the ducks without adult supervision, and not while you're on the ice SMH. This story won't be resolved for me until that person thanks you for saving their life. When I was 8 years old, a chandelier almost fell on top of me in my living room. I was watching a movie, Lilo and Stitch, when I heard a crack, looked up, and the huge chandelier was about to fall on top of me. I rolled off the couch and it barely missed me. I still had tons of cuts from all the glass though, just not a direct hit. Dang, that sounds like a movie moment. I'm glad you're still alive. I don't know why the universe wants me dead, but here are 2 of mine. I've got an arrhythmia and have had it at least since I was 11. Basically, my heart messes up and misses a beat, then overcorrects and goes into tachycardia. I faint and am extraordinarily bad at a lot of cardio, but I love running. When I was 13, I hadn't yet been diagnosed. I ran track and had been for 3 years, sprints and jumps. My coach wanted me to try the mile at a meet, and I agreed to try. At the meet, I wasn't able to finish because my chest pain got so bad. That night, I wasn't able to breathe well and felt like my chest was simultaneously exploding and being crushed. My mom said it must be an asthma attack, which I hadn't had before, and I was up all night. Actually, that was my first cardiac event. So, a mild heart attack at 13, struggling to breathe, terrified, and in intense pain. Before that, when I was very young, my aunt was watching me as I played outside in the rain. It was stormy. All I remember is running around and then waking up super tingly on the ground, like my whole body had fallen asleep. Either I or the ground next to me had been hit by lightning. My aunt panicked and still hasn't ever told my mom or dad, and I never have either. TLDR, I declined an indoor bedroom in favor of sleeping outside. Whole family died of a gas leak that night. A few years ago I was staying at a stranger's home in the western US. Situation like an Airbnb, but a different company. I actually slept in a camper outside of the main house, but could use the kitchen and bathroom inside. At one point they offered to let me sleep inside. They had an extra bedroom. I just enjoy sleeping out, so I declined. That night, there was a gas leak in the house and the entire family died. I actually knocked on the door that morning and had to leave because nobody would let me in. That night the police were there and told me to leave. I've done a lot of really dangerous things, but I think this is the event that most haunts me. God dang, dude. Man, this still haunts me. So my friend invited me to their house, and we were just chilling when he asks me if I wanted to see his snake. I was like, yeah sure, because 9-year-old me thought snakes were cool and edgy. He takes me out to his shed and there's a maybe 50 centimeters x 50 centimeters and a meter deep plastic container. I knew pretty much nothing about snakes, being 9 and very into sharks and the ocean. So he hands me this plastic container with holes poked in the top and tells me his snake is in it. I hesitantly pull off the top because the only other person I know who has a snake has a proper home for it, not a plastic box in a shed, and even then I was wary. I open it and a really freaking eastern diamondback rattlesnake jumps out at me, and I get bit on my left shoulder. The kid runs inside and calls an ambulance while I sit there in agony and the snake slithers away. I got the anti-venom I needed, and that his mother confirmed she never bought a snake for him, and to this day I still have no clue how he managed to trap one in a plastic box and keep it in his shed. As 20-year-old American, I was riding a motorcycle across Vietnam like the Top Gear special. I stupidly decided that riding on Highway 1, the main trucking highway from HCM City to Hanoi, at night, in the rain was a good idea. At one point I was riding and I could see two headlights in the oncoming lane blinding me with their high beams. Then all of a sudden the two headlights turn into four as a bus is passing the truck coming head on at me. I try my best to swerve off onto the shoulder, but I'm being blinded by both their high beams and I have rain hitting me in my eyes. I land up getting over just enough and the bus came probably an inch from hitting me head on. People are so ignorant. You'll have to start switching off the bright headlights on the road. I almost drowned in a deep, crowded wave pool at a water park when I was a small child. Oh god, me too. I remember looking up at all the tubes and not seeing a way out. I think I actually climbed up some dude's legs and popped up in his tube with him. Haha, in retrospect that must have been a shock. Sat down on a bench to have a smoke after asking a friend who had hooked up with a random if it was okay if I get the first taxi as I was on my own. First taxi spotted. They jumped in and left me after a night out. BF troubles at the time, so stupid me. Thought it was sensible to walk just into a park and sit on a seat just inside to contemplate him. BF. Being a random guy came and tried to talk to me. Got a weird vibe as he wouldn't take no for an answer. He started hitting me, strangling me and dragged me into the bushes. Had a weird out of body experience, so guessed I was dying. Hadn't realized I had been screaming. People in houses nearby heard me and phoned the police. Group of 5 random men heard me as they were coming home and pulled him off me. He tells them I was his GF and we were having a fight. I tell them I have never seen him before. He tries to run. They accidentally trip him many times. Police arrive. I end up naked in the police station taking my clothes off for evidence and getting photographed. Then the coroner's office the next day after the police took me back to the scene and collect stuff that had fallen out of my pockets during the struggle. Told by the extent of pitachi that I was 20 seconds away from death. Those guys were given a £100 reward each for public service. A couple couldn't collect as they had some sort of outstanding police warrant, which was a shame. They deserve that reward. Always pisses me off watching movies where people are strangled. I looked like a beetroot. My entire face was purple with burst blood vessels. My eyes were completely bloodshot, bruised finger marks all over my neck. He was a newly married naval officer with a 9-month-old child. He got dishonorably discharged, lost his pension and got sent to Colchester, Armed Forces prison in the UK. I had to sit with him and his family while waiting to go into court. Only time I have fainted in my life in the witness box. Fricked up my A levels. Really don't think I'd like to go through that again. As I was 3 years old, a boy pressed my head in the sand and sat on it. My mum saw it and saved me. Now I have claustrophobia. I had a stint in college where I was in a really bad place and my drink got extremely out of hand with it. Every time I drank I'd wake up the next morning to a pile of vomit next to my bed with no recollection of doing so. Eventually I just habitually left a bucket there. One morning I woke up and my mouth was full of it, and it had clearly been in my mouth for a long time as I had gotten so drunk that I didn't even roll over or wake up, etc. I have no clue how I didn't choke on it and suffocate in my sleep, but I stopped drinking for quite a while after that. That's terrifying. Hope you're doing better nowadays. I watched one of my boys get shot in the leg because he said, and I quote, "Yeah, I can't take a bullet." Someone said, "Are you sure?" and he said, "Frickin' shoot me then," and he bled a lot. I'm not sure if it was close to death, but it certainly qualifies as a horrible death. Dang. People are so stubborn. Went cycling with a friend of mine and it started raining, so the road became slippery as heck. We hit the pedals even harder to escape from the rain as we were only a few minutes away from home, and in a not even that sharp corner I just slipped as I slid on the wet tarmac. I saw a semi-truck rolling towards me and thought, welp, that's it. As we passed each other we missed by maybe a few centimeters. My friend told me after he came to check on me that he thought it was over and only a miracle saved me that day. In 2017 when I was 12 I almost drowned to death. It is the worst way to die, IMHO. The helpless feeling is awful. 1 minute I was full panic mode, trying to breathe but every breath was water. I felt like I was burning. Then, it didn't feel peaceful, but it felt like I was ready. The whole thing that says you see all your memories before dying is true. I just had this bad feeling knowing that my parents wouldn't have seen me grow up, couldn't see my friends anymore, etc. I suddenly heard a loud sound like bzzzzz and everything went black. Somehow someone saw me and saved me. The bad thing is that I've had to cope with depression since then. I'm better nowadays, but the helpless feeling just never left me after I almost drowned. One thing I've never said to anyone is that I saw an elf while drowning. I know, weird as heck, but I think it was just my mind making up stuff for the lack of oxygen. TLDR. Had a brain bleed. Several mundane decisions over the next 2 days saved my life. Sometime in 2011 I was out running early in the morning and suddenly got a headache. Didn't think much of it and just cut my run short. When I got back from work my wife expressed concern that I had had a headache all day and asked me to go to sick call in the morning if I still had it. I was in the military at the time. The next day I went to sick call and managed to get the one doctor to ever read my file. She said it was strange that in the 6 years I had been enlisted I had only been to sick call once, and that had led to surgery. So said I should go get a CAT scan to be on the safe side, and I had no objections. My wife insisted on coming even though I tried to explain it was most likely nothing to be worried about. We get to the other hospital, I have the scan done, and we get placed in a waiting room. While I'm waiting a nurse brings me a pill cocktail to help with the pain. Up until this point I hadn't taken anything. I've never liked taking pills as I have a very low tolerance to most things and they tend to make me feel strange. I'm about to accept this when another nurse just about dives through the curtain and slaps the cup out of the other nurse's hand while shouting no. Turns out my brain was bleeding and the medication I was about to take would have made it so much worse. Less than 20 minutes later I was strapped to a board and driven to the nearest naval hospital where I was knocked out and given a tube that ran from my leg into my head. The doctor who was there when I woke up had been chatting with my wife. Apparently if the sick call doc hadn't decided something was a little weird it was likely I would have died. If the nurse had let me take that medication it was likely I would have died. If I had taken anything for my headache the first day was likely I would have died. As it is, I was ambulatory after about a month and able to go home at around 7 weeks. I was lethargic and unable to perform anything other than light duty that involved a lot of sitting down for about a year after, and of course that was the end of my military career. After about a year I started to get back my energy again, and once that started it only really took a month to get back to about where I was prior to the bleed. But it was a little troubling just how many normal things could have happened that day that would have killed me. Silver linings though. As far as doctors can tell I escaped without any long-term effects, and the neurologist has told me that I am almost certainly going to have another and that one is likely to end me. No idea when that'll happen, but I am assured that it'll be painless. Knowing this has allowed me to pursue a lot of hobbies that I once thought were too dangerous. It just seems that knowing how it's likely to end makes me feel like it's unlikely to end any other way. Holy crap, man. That's insane. I jumped over a rail at Pier 33 near Fisherman's Wharf at night and landed in the bay underneath the pier. It was disgusting, but all my friends helped me get out. Went by this same area during the day later on to discover I had missed several iron spikes sticking out of the wood where I dove in. I wasn't even through the first sentence when I though OMG. He's gonna get skewered. Lol. Back in the 90s I smoked some lace bud out at Ocean Beach, and though it'd be funny to jump into the dark off of one of the huge sand dunes. One hospital visit later. I was living in Africa at the time. I was staying with a family native to that country, but they were connected with the group I was with. You know, to get the real way of living over there. Anyways, every house is gated off with 12 featuring gates and fences around their properties. I had come home one evening. Later, like 2 AM, I was picking up a friend from the airport. I enter through the gate door. I had a key obviously. The walk from the gate to the fence door is about 100 feet. 33 yards or 30.48 meters. Well, they have guard dogs. At first, they barked to let the homeowner know someone was there. Now mind you, I had only lived there for like 3 weeks, so they knew me, but not well. I start walking slowly. The dogs get more aggressive with their barks. I know from early childhood, not to run, to not show fear. I'm slowly walking. keeping my hands up. I'm about halfway at this point. They are now starting to sniff and bite at my pant legs. What felt like a full-on American football field length away, I finally reached my door. Locked, of course. They're getting more aggressive. I'm like, is this how I die? To dogs eating me in Africa? I fumbled my keys around and not trying to drop them. Unlock the door and get inside. I did not sleep. I was so happy just to be breathing and alive. Crap, man. I've been afraid of dogs my entire life, and people always tell me I'm being irrational. Most dogs could absolutely kill a person if they wanted to. In 2006, when I was 7 years old, I went over to the park with my older brother. He would have been 9. Back then he had a bit of an obsession with those for sale signs, and if he found them dumped anywhere he'd bring it back home. We found one, but it had some concrete at the end of the wooden pole and we couldn't pick it up. Keep in mind that this is just down the hill from our house, literally not even a minute away. I didn't want to go and get my mum by myself, but I didn't want to stay alone with the sign either. We argued and he ran up the hill and across the quiet road to get our mum. Another thing to keep in mind, we live on a council estate in the UK, so this was hardly a road that saw tons of traffic, and the speed limit was 30 miles per hour. That's about 48 kph for you Americans. I followed him and didn't stop before crossing the road. I just ran right out, right into the side of a 7-seater estate car. My leg got lodged by the tire and the car ran my leg over before flinging me back onto the pavement. I ended up with multiple open fractures in my leg and needed a few surgeries to fix it. But my tibia and fibula bones in my right leg actually ended up fusing together during the healing process, and the doctors decided this wasn't going to cause any harm. Luck was definitely on my side that day. Had I been a few seconds faster I would have run right in front of that car, and I was a tiny 7-year-old. No way would I have survived, even despite the fact that the driver was going just under the speed limit. It also just so happened that I was wearing some thick jeans and brown faux leather cowboy boots. This was the early 2000s. They had to cut the boots and jeans off of my body, and it turns out the damage would have been a lot more severe if I'd been wearing less clothing. TLDR. Got hit by a car as a child. Cringy 2000s show style pretty much saved my leg. I saw what you did there, an American. When I was younger I was eating dinner and my mom made me laugh, causing some pie and mashed potatoes to get stuck in my throat. I was choking for about 2 minutes before I was able to remove the blockage. Choking is not fun : Pro tip: if you're choking, do everything in your power to hold your breath, then concentrate and inhale as sharply as you can through your nose. This causes one to start coughing violently and subsequently eject the blockage. I've saved myself from choking twice doing so. I used to go out once a week with friends to get lunch or dinner at a sushi bar and just shoot the crap with the boys. One week as usual we went out and all ordered several types of sushi and shared per usual. Fast forward to that evening after I go to bed with a full belly and a smile. I awake pre-dawn to hives covering the majority of my body and my throat swelling shut. Literally crawled to my parents' room and collapsed. Woke up at the air. I scheduled an allergy test and swore off fish, which I was not allergic to previously. That's my worst fear. I'm sure they told you at the doctor, but it typically takes multiple exposures to an allergen to have an anaphylactic reaction. Thankfully that knowledge has made me aware of some allergies before they got to that point. Had a pneumothorax last month. First one. Went to emergency at local hospital, full of COVID-19 potential cases. Doctors told me they had to operate me next day, and when I asked if there was any risk they told me, absolutely none. We never missed an operation like that and we'll be doing it with the help of the latest technology scanner. It will take us like 10 minutes and you'll feel immediately relieved better after. They gave me a lot of morphine for the pain and, in the morning, during the operation I heard something like, "Oh shit, he's doing an hemorrhage. We need to send him to this other clinic in emergency." Kept me waiting 1:30 while internally bleeding and suffocating in my own blood before the ambulance arrived for the transfer. The doc at the second hospital yelled I want him in the block immediately when I arrived, and he saved my life I guess. And that's a very summarized version of what happened. Sorry for my English mistakes, I'm French. I had the umbilical cord around my neck when my mum was in labor. They lost my heartbeat and I was an emergency C-section. Admittedly, it was a lot more horrible for my mum and dad than it was for my unborn self. When you almost die before you are even born. IDK if I would have died lol, but my shower was upstairs and underneath the bathroom there was another room. Directly underneath the shower, there was a lamp. Electricity. What happened was that the water out of the shower would leak into the ceiling of the room underneath because of a problem with the pipes. So one time I was showering and was going to turn off the water and feel this power surge. Don't know the English on my hand. It wasn't the more common light variant either that everyone has once in a while when touching a doorknob or whatever. My hand legitimately hurt after that, felt very uncomfortable. We didn't know what it was, but once we found out I feel like it could have been much worse. The word is electrocution in case you wanted to know. When I was 5 years old I accidentally hung myself. I was swinging on a rope from a ladder and somehow the rope wrapped around my neck. Luckily, my uncle was a cop and lived a few houses down and cut me down and performed CPR. Originally the doctors didn't think I was gonna make it through the night. When I did they said I wasn't gonna wake up. When I woke up they thought I would have severe brain damage. I'm a perfectly normal 24-year-old man and the only lasting damage I have is a crap memory. 2 years of misdiagnosis by multiple doctors. My bowel ruptured in the middle of the night due to undiagnosed Crohn's disease. Vomited up my own feces. All my veins collapsed and paramedics couldn't get a cannula in anywhere other than my feet. No top line on the heart rate monitor. Excruciating pain but could get meds as my heart rate was so low. 8 hours surgery. Woke up with an ileostomy bag. 100% didn't think I would wake up. Second year in college, I was out with friends drinking and ended up getting too drunk. I stumbled too far into the road and almost got hit by a wine red 2011 Malibu. If they hadn't have swerved, I probably wouldn't be able to post this right now. Picture a giant iron cauldron flipped over so that its spiky feet are pointing up in the air. Imagine it under a rope hanging from a treehouse. I was in this treehouse and got on the rope to climb down, but the rope broke when I got all my weight on it. Fell straight down, flat on my back onto the dirt. A few minutes earlier, I had moved the cauldron thinking I wanted to swing on the rope, but climbed up into the treehouse instead. Still kind of freaks me out when I think about the whole sequence of events. I hit the ground so hard that the wind was knocked out of me and I couldn't move for a few seconds. I would have died of a broken back for sure if the cauldron would have still been there. I took acid and had a bad trip, thinking I would die in my college dorm by asphyxiating on my vomit. Acid doesn't kill you. A month later I nearly fulfilled the prophecy on Halloween when I got the drunkest I've ever been. I told my roommate to lie me on my side if I vomited before I even started drinking because the acid trip scared me. I then proceeded to drink a solo cup of rum and multiple shots of vodka after that after not eating that day. I'm small and had only had alcohol a handful of times before then, so I had no tolerance. I blacked out and fell down and vomited while laying on my back and my roommate rolled me on my side. The vomit was brown and red and we always wondered if it was blood after the fact. I woke up mostly naked and alone because her and her BF and their friend wanted to get the vomit clothes off me. I was tucked into my bed at least. So that's how acid and my roommate saved my life. My ex-husband also nearly beat me to death once. I had basically given up fighting because he was a lot bigger and stronger than me and had been choking me for a while. He let up for a second and I said, "You have no excuse, you aren't even drunk." He was, and I thought he was, but he denied it earlier before he beat me when I asked. And for some reason that made him start crying and walk away for long enough for me to run out the door. I'm lucky he didn't follow me and that a neighbor answered and that I was wearing clothes. He got 2 charges of assault because when this happened, my parents had made me press charges a month or 2 before and the case was still pending. I was in denial or something and went back to him. He got like 2 years probation and that's it, and the cops didn't come through to court with the photos of me they took and no one told me that just asking for a copy of my medical records and presenting it wasn't enough. But they had him pay for my emergency visits due to him. Despite that, I got free counseling with a cool therapist and I have a wonderful and kind partner now. I almost drowned while tubing down a river. I was in college when this happened, was with friends who were pretty drunk off tequila, but I was sober. I was swimming the river because we only had 3 tubes and there was 5 of us, and I was just ahead of my friends in the tubes. We were just about to reach the end. when the back of my bikini top got caught on a stick in the river. As I was scrambling to get it unhooked, my friend's tubes floated on top of me and got stuck on the same log stick, holding me under the water. I began to freak out more, causing the stick to tear up my back pretty badly. All I can remember thinking was my best friend's name, who was also sober, and hoping that she had noticed what happened as she was swimming behind the tubes. Maybe a minute went by and my lungs were really burning before my best friend came to my rescue and untied the back of my bikini, freeing me. I just remember swimming madly to the dock at the end of the river, like 15 feet away, and jumping out of the water onto land. I coughed up so much water, and as soon as I was out of the water my friend screamed at the blood dripping down my back, even though I couldn't feel the cuts at that point due to all the adrenaline. Needless to say, I'm not close with my friends who were drunk that day, but I do credit my best friend with saving my life. I still have a couple scars on my back from the branch. Also, that bikini was ruined, but I'm glad to be alive. Well, this is potentially a little off topic. It's not so much the closest I've been to death, but the most danger I've ever put myself in. I climbed up a mountain peak, the Chimney Tops in Tennessee. It's around 200 feet of exposed rock on the top of a mountain, and it was a hot sunny summer day. My hand started to burn from the rock, and I almost slipped off. It curves a little bit, so for most of the climb, you're over a pretty long fall, then a tumble to certain death. Once the adrenaline kicked in though, I felt one of the strangest sensations I've ever felt. I was feeling pain, but it didn't bother me. Everything got quiet and I could feel my heart beat. I heard the soft wind blowing past my ears, and I became hyper focused on the current task of climbing up this rock face. I was able to climb all the way to the top, and then all the way back down a few minutes later. The adrenaline rush gradually faded as I walked down the trail. Eventually I had to stop and dip my hands in a cold mountain stream along the trail because the pain of the burns was starting to get to me. I had mild burns on my hands from the rocks, but a few burns were worth it for the view alone and survival. I was going like 70 miles per hour on the highway and the cars in front abruptly stopped and I had to immediately swerve over like 3 lanes, and IDK how no one hit me or how I didn't die. You were clearly driving too close to the cars in front or you weren't paying attention. Isn't death always horrible? My experience wasn't nearly as traumatic or unexpected, but I still think that if I had died it would have been a horrible death. I was only 14 years old after all. It had been a tough year for me. I was struggling with anorexia and only eating about 200 calories a day. It was January, and my family had planned a vacation to a ski resort. After months of not eating, I had reached my lowest weight at 68 pounds. I practically had no body fat to isolate me from the cold, and it was awful. I would dress in 5 layers of clothing, but my bones would still hurt from the cold. The worst part came when the heating system broke down one night and we had to make do with the fireplace in the living room. I can't explain how awful the pain was that night. I remember lying in my bed and thinking that if I could just gather enough energy to move to the living room and lay down next to the fireplace, I might be able to survive the night, but I couldn't bring myself to move. So I stayed in my bed, freezing and in pain, and I remember just trying to focus on my breathing, because at this point I felt like my lungs wanted to give up on me. I felt like I had to force myself to keep breathing the cold air. And then something worse started to happen. I felt my heart start to give up on me too. My heartbeat started to slow down and I knew that was it. A feeling of desperation arrested me as I tried and failed to will my heart to keep going. And that was it. I passed out and woke up a week later in a hospital. I don't remember much about my recovery, as I was always tired and weak. But boy am I glad that that experience was a wake-up call to me and actually inspired me to take recovery therapy seriously. I remember before it all happened, I always used to fantasize about dying and leaving all my problems behind. I was a victim of debauchery and wanted nothing more than to destroy my body, as I believed it to be a symbol of shame and disgrace. It's crazy how my body had to give up on me for me to realize how desperately I did not want to give up on it and my life yet. To be fair, I think that sounds pretty traumatic. I was overtaking a trailer on highway. That bastard surprisingly changed the lane. I was saved by fraction of seconds from being crushed under. I haul my horses and I am always double and triple checking my mirrors when I change lanes. It always freaks me out seeing people not even glance when they are hauling. My time to shine. Our setting is around 2015. I'm 10 years old. I had been throwing up for a few days. Nothing could even come close to entering my stomach. Went to the hospital. They couldn't find a vein for around 25-30 minutes. I was in there a good 4-5 weeks. Had to have a feeding tube. The whole workup with scans and such, and was under constant observation. I didn't know it then, but medical students thought I was such an odd case. Around 10 per day, give or take. When I left, I got to bring my dog Bentley, RIP, to school to show him around to my class. That was neat. I got a diagnosis of cyclic vomiting syndrome this year. Not that great of a story, but it's here. To put this event into context, I was, and still am, an autistic kid put into a small autism school located in a mall. It was absolute heck. There was one incident where I got hurt fairly badly, but it probably couldn't have been lethal. Another incident, however, could have potentially killed me if not for the sub-ish. He was at the school all of the time. Basically, I was nearly strangled. Specifically, I was in my journalism class, and, as usual, everyone was talking over the video, and, also as usual, I was yelling at them to stop. Eventually, one kid, note that I am probably one of the weakest kids in the school, got up from the couch he was sitting on, ran over to me, and clenched his hands around my neck. It wasn't like we were enemies. In fact, we got along pretty darn well. But then again, it was an autism school. Thankfully, the previously mentioned subish came over and got him off of me. It was not a good day. TLDR, I nearly get strangled by a sort of friend in the middle of journalism class at my autism school. When I was like 13-14 on a train with my friends, we were slowing down coming into the train station, being stood at the door. These were older doors you had to open yourself and had a bigger window that could slide half down. I thought it would be a good idea to stick my head out of the window. I was extremely close to a wall and probably having my head ripped off. Safe to say it was the last time I did anything like that. You don't realize how dumb you can be when you're young and with your friends. I was out hiking in a very remote part of the woods. I walked up to a large rock near the edge of a ravine. I was unaware it had rained a few days ago and the ground was still moist, and the ground underneath the rock gave out. I remember starting to fall and then my memory goes black. The next thing I remembered was going in and out of consciousness and being dragged on some type of sled. The next full memory I had, I was laying on the ground next to a makeshift sled adjacent to my car. I was seriously injured, but someone called the police and fire department to check on me. For some reason they collected DNA from the ropes used to pull the sled and run it through the database. I got a call a week later from a detective asking if anything else happened. I said no and asked why. The detective informed me the DNA came back to a suspect of multiple murders. I would say I was very lucky the guy did not kill me. That's insane. Either a death or a serious injury, but on 495 around DC. I never saw it happen, but apparently a construction vehicle lost a ladder, which was promptly smashed into pieces by a tractor trailer going at about 60-70 mph. Large chunks of metal flying everywhere, and one went sailing right over the top of our car and smashed into the windshield behind us. Cars everywhere were swerving in and out of their lane, trying to avoid the metal shards. There were multiple side swipes and fender benders. To this day, I have no idea how I managed to avoid all of the metal shards and not get hit by any other vehicle. I tell you, that Hyundai Accent was a pretty nimble little car. It's cause you were playing Franklin. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.